When we visualize the Victorian era today, we almost immediately picture a stern and stout elderly woman dressed entirely in black, presiding stoically over a global empire that famously controlled a quarter of the world's population. However, the true story of Queen Victoria is far more vibrant and complex than those somber portraits suggest, revealing a passionate young woman who redefined the British monarchy and oversaw a century of unprecedented human progress. Born in 1819 at Kensington Palace, young Alexandrina Victoria was fifth in line to the throne, meaning her eventual accession was an unexpected twist of fate caused by the premature deaths of her father and uncles. Her childhood was unfortunately not a fairy tale of royal luxury, but rather a lonely ordeal dominated by the strict Kensington system, a suffocating set of rules designed by her mother and the ambitious advisor John Conroy. They forced the young princess to sleep in her mother's bedroom every single night and forbade her from interacting with other children, hoping to make her weak and dependent on them when she eventually inherited the crown. Yet this oppressive upbringing had the exact opposite effect on her personality, forging a will of iron and a fierce independence that would manifest the very moment she became queen in 1837 at age 18. On the day she ascended to the throne, her very first command was for her bed to be moved out of her mother's room, signaling an immediate and permanent break from the controlling figures of her youth. She was the first monarch to take up residence in Buckingham Palace, struggling initially to navigate the political landscape. But she quickly learned to assert her authority over a government dominated by older and experienced men. The young queen was vibrant and romantic, a stark contrast to the staid image of her later years, and she soon fell deeply in love with her German cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Because royal protocol dictated that no one could propose marriage to a reigning monarch, Victoria had to take matters into her own hands and nervously proposed to Albert herself during his visit in October 1839. Their marriage in 1840 marked the beginning of a passionate and productive partnership that would fundamentally shape the 19th century, as Albert became not just her husband, but her unofficial co-ruler and most trusted advisor. Together, they navigated a rapidly changing world where the Industrial Revolution was tearing down old agrarian traditions and replacing them with steam engines, sprawling factories, and a completely new social structure centered on urban life. Victoria and Albert worked tirelessly to modernize the monarchy, presenting themselves as a model of domestic morality and respectability that appealed to the rising middle class, who valued hard work and family above aristocratic excess. The couple had 9 children together, a large family that would eventually marry into royal houses across Europe, though privately Victoria famously dreaded pregnancy and often described newborn babies as ugly and frog-like creatures. Despite her personal distaste for the physical realities of motherhood, she conscientiously projected the image of the ideal mother, while Albert took a very active role in the education and management of their growing royal nursery. The mid-19th century saw Britain become the workshop of the world, a status celebrated triumphantly by the Great Exhibition of 1851, which was Prince Albert's passion project and a showcase of British technological dominance. Millions of visitors flocked to the Crystal Palace in London to marvel at the machinery and inventions that defined the era, from massive steam locomotives to the delicate telegraph instruments that were shrinking the globe. While the Queen celebrated progress, her kingdom also faced dark challenges, including the horrific Irish potato famine and the squalid living conditions of the urban poor, which were immortalized in the novels of Charles Dickens. Victoria was acutely aware of the fragility of life, having survived at least 7 assassination attempts during her reign, usually by mentally unstable individuals, which ironically served to increase her popularity with the sympathetic public. However, The greatest tragedy of her life struck in December 1861, when her beloved Albert died of typhoid fever at the young age of 42, shattering her world and plunging her into deep despair. Devastated by the loss, Victoria retreated into complete seclusion, refusing to appear in public and wearing black mourning clothes for the rest of her life, earning her the somber nickname, the Widow of Windsor. For over a decade, she was rarely seen by her subjects, a dangerous absence that allowed Republican sentiment to grow in Britain as people began to question the necessity of a monarch who was invisible. During this period of isolation, she developed a close and controversial friendship with her Scottish servant, John Brown, a relationship that scandalized the court and led her own children to refer to him with disdain. Despite the gossip and the political pressure to abdicate, Victoria slowly began to re-emerge in the 1870s, guided partly by her favorite Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, who flattered her back into the public eye. Disraeli understood the power of imperial grandeur and orchestrated the title of Empress of India for Victoria in 1876. Binding the monarchy closer to the vast territories that Britain now controlled across the globe. She took her role as Empress seriously, learning to speak and write in Hindustani and employing Indian servants, including Abdul Karim, who became her Munshi, or teacher, much to the annoyance of her royal household. By the time of her Golden Jubilee in 1887, celebrating 50 years on the throne, the public's frustration with her seclusion had faded, replaced by a deep reverence for her as a symbol of stability. The British Empire was now at its absolute zenith, covering approximately 1/4 of the Earth's land surface, and Victoria stood at the very center of this global web as the matriarch of the world. Her influence extended far beyond Britain's borders through her children and grandchildren, who occupied the thrones of Germany, Russia, Spain, and Greece, weaving a complex political tapestry that would tragically unravel in World War I. Ironically, while she connected the royal families of Europe through marriage, she also unknowingly passed a deadly legacy to them in the form of the gene for hemophilia, which would devastate the Russian and Spanish dynasties. The Victorian era was not just about empire and royalty, it was a time of radical scientific thought, most notably Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, which challenged the religious foundations of society and the Queen herself. Medical advancements were also transforming daily life, and Victoria herself played a pivotal role in this by using chloroform during childbirth, controversial at the time, which helped popularize anesthesia for women across the Western world. As she entered her twilight years, the grandmother of Europe became a beloved icon, her small, stout figure representing the continuity and strength of the British nation during a time of dizzying and rapid change. The Diamond Jubilee of 1897 was a massive global celebration, with troops from every corner of the empire marching through London to honor the monarch who had reigned longer than any predecessor in history. Yet behind the public pageantry, Victoria remained a woman of strong and often contradictory opinions, fiercely opposing the movement for women's voting rights, which she famously described as a mad, wicked folly of the times. She was a prolific writer, keeping detailed journals throughout her entire life that totaled over 120 volumes, offering historians an intimate, though later heavily edited, look into her private thoughts and feelings. Her relationship with her eldest son, the future King Edward VII, was always strained and difficult as she blamed his youthful indiscretions for causing the stress that she believed led to Albert's premature death. In her final years, the Boer War in South Africa cast a long shadow over the empire, a conflict that distressed the aging queen and highlighted the growing cracks in the foundation of British imperialism. When Queen Victoria finally passed away at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight in January 1901, It felt to many of her subjects as though the world itself had fundamentally shifted. Her death marked the definitive end of the 19th century and the conclusion of an era that had seen the transition from candlelight and horse-drawn carriages to electric lighting, automobiles, and the modern industrial age. She had reigned for 63 years and 7 months, a record that stood unbroken until her great-great-granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth II, surpassed it in the 21st century, linking two great Elizabethan and Victorian epochs. Victoria requested a military funeral and demanded that she be buried with a diverse collection of personal mementos, including one of Prince Albert's dressing gowns and a plaster cast of his hand, symbolizing eternal love. Secretly and perhaps surprisingly, she also requested to be buried with a lock of John Brown's hair and his picture hidden in her hand, a final testament to the complex private life she kept hidden. The legacy of Queen Victoria is visible everywhere today, from the statues in city squares across the Commonwealth to the names of fierce waterfalls, vast deserts, and entire states like Queensland and Victoria in Australia. But her deepest impact lies in the model of constitutional monarchy she perfected, where the sovereign reigns with dignity and influence, but without direct political power, a system that saved the British crown from revolution. She navigated the transition of Britain into a modern democracy, allowing the vote to expand to more working men, while she remained the steadfast emotional anchor of the nation during times of turbulence and uncertainty. The Victorian moral code, with its emphasis on duty, restraint and charity, left a lasting imprint on British culture, even as the artistic movements of the time began to rebel against its perceived stuffiness. Her reign saw the blossoming of literature with the works of the Bronte sisters, Thomas Hardy and Oscar Wilde, creating a rich cultural heritage that continues to be adapted into films and series today. We must also acknowledge the complexities of her empire, which brought wealth to Britain, but often came at the cost of exploitation and cultural erasure in the colonies, a legacy that is still debated today. Victoria herself was a figure of contradictions, a powerful female ruler in a patriarchal society who opposed women's rights, and a recluse who became the most photographed and recognizable woman in the entire world. Her distinctive profile appeared on postage stamps, coins, and statues, becoming the very first global brand, instantly recognizable to people from the snowy streets of Canada to the tropical jungles of India and beyond. To understand the modern world, we must understand the Victorian era, for it laid the foundations of global trade, telecommunications, and the geopolitical alliances that would shape the conflicts of the 20th century. Queen Victoria was the bridge between the old world of royal absolutism and the new world of democratic modernity, walking that precarious line with a stubborn determination that ultimately preserved the throne for her descendants. Her story reminds us that history is driven not just by great economic forces, but by the personalities, loves, and griefs of the individuals who happen to find themselves wearing the crown at critical moments. From the frightened teenager waking up to the news that she was queen, to the elderly matriarch passing away at the dawn of a new century, her life was a remarkable journey of survival. She was a woman who loved deeply, mourned fiercely, and ruled with a sense of duty that defined the character of her nation for generations, leaving an indelible mark on the pages of history. As we look back at her reign, we see more than just a stiff figure in a history book. We see a woman who defined an entire age and left a complicated, enduring legacy. The Victorian era was a crucible of modernity, and at its heart stood a small woman with a commanding presence, whose name became synonymous with an entire century of human striving and achievement. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Queen Victoria, a monarch who was truly larger than life and whose influence continues to echo through our world in surprising ways. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, please like and subscribe for more stories about the figures who shaped our world, and let us know in the comments which historical figure we should cover next.